Hey everyone, it's Carissa and I am here today as a part of the Altenew Pretty Pink Posh collaboration blog hop. And I'm going to be creating a couple of projects today using these products from Altenew and Pretty Pink Posh. I have the festive silhouette stamp set here as well as the decorative label 1 die from Pretty Pink Posh. It's one of the newer ones. And I'm just kind of choosing an image that I think fits well within that oval. The oval is the only part I'm actually using of that die set. And I settled on the tree, and I'm going to do a little ombre stamping here. So I have the Hero Arts ombre green stamp pad, and I'm just kind of pressing that on and kind of tapping back and forth over the surface of the stamp so that I blend the lines where those colors come together so that there's not quite that harsh straight line between those. And once I get the ink on there, I'm going to go ahead and stamp it on this piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock. Now you can see here I didn't quite get a great impression, but that's okay. I'm going to take one of my favorite tools in my craft room, which is a regular old makeup sponge. I'm going to cut it down, and then I'm just going to tap some of that ink from the ink pad. I'm going to blot it off a little bit on a scrap piece of paper and then just tap it over those areas on my stamped image where I didn't quite get perfection. And that just blended it all in and made my image usable. So that's something you can kind of do if you don't kind of get a great impression, especially on these very solid image stamps. Now I decided after I stamped it that I wanted to go ahead and clear heat emboss over the top of this. So I've gone ahead and cleaned my stamp, re-inked in some Versamark ink, and then just stamped that same image right over the top. And then just added my clear embossing powder over that, and then I'll heat set that. Now I'll show you an easier way to do this in the second card. At this point I hadn't really decided that I was going to do some heat embossing over the top. So I'll show you in the next card how to make that a little bit easier on you. So now I've taken this stamped panel and I'm just running that through my die cut machine using just the oval part of this Pretty Pink Posh decorative label 1 die. And then I'm also going to cut that same oval shape out of this metallic cardstock from Tim Holtz. And I'm going to use the outer frame of that gold frame to kind of frame up my image. And we're going to end up kind of spotlighting this or popping it up in the end. So once I got that all kind of figured out, I'm going to go ahead and take this Noel stamp. This is from that same festive silhouette stamp set. I've prepped a piece of 43-pound Essentials by Ellen Vellum, and I've stamped that greeting in some Versamark ink and then just added some Ranger red embossing powder and heat set that so I have a nice shiny red sentiment for my card. At this point, I really felt like that front panel needed a little more detail, so I just took this stitched rectangle die from Lawn Fawn and went ahead and cut that panel to give it that little stitched detail on the front of the card. Now I'm going to show you a little method that I found useful lately for adding some dimension to intricate shapes. I am using this double-sided stick-it adhesive and I am applying it to a piece of white fun foam. Now this is the same fun foam that I like to use behind large panels on my card fronts. And I'm now going to use it to add some dimension behind my die cut. So I've just taken that double-sided adhesive, applied it to the fun foam, and now I'm removing the second backer of that stick-it adhesive, and I'm going to add some Neenah Solar White cardstock right over the top of it. Now the purpose of adding the cardstock is that it gives this fun foam a little bit of structure and support so that as I run it through my die cut machine, that fun foam doesn't get pressed out and kind of lose its shape. When you use the fun foam by itself, especially when you're working with intricate dies like that little frame, it has a tendency to kind of push out and then the fun foam doesn't exactly match the cardstock piece that you've cut. Now, if I had thought about it earlier, I could have applied the metallic gold cardstock right to the fun foam, but I didn't. And so this was my remedy for that. And like I said, that cardstock just really keeps it from pushing out and stretching out, and then it gives you a perfect fit for those intricate die cut pieces. So now that I got the dimension added to those stamped and die cut pieces, I went ahead and added that stamped piece onto the fun foam and cardstock piece with a little tape runner adhesive, and I added the gold piece on with some liquid adhesive. And now I've just taken my entire card front and added some peppermint cardstock behind it, and I'm going to apply that to a wood grain card base. This is a Essentials by Ellen 110-pound cardstock that I just love. And of course I added a layer of that fun foam behind it using some Be Creative tape. And now to add just a little bit more color and pattern to the front of the card, I've added a couple of pattern paper strips as well as my Heat Emboss vellum sentiment strip. And I'm going to attach that entire dimensional kind of spotlighted piece right there with some liquid glue. And I'm going to finish these off with a sprinkling of Pretty Pink Posh sequins in raspberry and sparkling clear. And I added one of the little gold star sequins to the top of that tree as well. Now here is a little bit easier way to do this. You can first take your image, stamp it in the Versamark ink, and then take it to your ink pad. This allows you to heat emboss with any dye ink that you may have. And the Versamark ink does not cause a problem on these dye ink pads. At least I've never had a problem. You saw me kind of ink it up there with the Versamark and then stamp it onto that Ombre ink pad. This is the red Ombre ink pad, and just kind of tapped it back and forth to blend those lines. And then I added my embossing powder right over the top and then heat set that. And that just kept me from having to try to line up that stamp with the Versamark over it again. Now you saw me transfer a little bit of that red ink to my Versamark ink pad, but that was because my stamp wasn't clean. So for my sentiment on this card, I am just doing a little bit of stamp surgery on the large sentiment that's in the Festive Silhouettes stamp set from Altenew. So I've kept the part that says Happy Holiday Wishes, and I've just trimmed off the part that says To You and Yours. And that just made the sentiment fit a little bit better onto my card front. And now I'm going to go ahead and gold heat emboss this on some vellum. Now be careful when you are trimming your stamps down. You don't want to cut through any of the words or any part of the image, but this is a great way to use your stamps in more ways. And then I have now not one sentiment, but two sentiments that I can actually use on cards. And then of course, if you don't want to do some stamp surgery, you can always mask and stamp that as well. Now I'm taking this Stitched Banner Duo 2 die from Pretty Pink Posh, and I'm going to do a little partial die cutting. This is going to allow me to make this stitched banner a little bit longer and fit the card front a little bit better. So what I've done is I've just first added that to my sandwich, and I've allowed the top part of that die to stick out of the cutting plate sandwich. And now I'm moving that up and kind of lining it up with the lines that I've already cut. And this time I'm only going to cut the top portion of that die cut. So you can see anything that's sticking out of that die cut sandwich will not cut. And that gave me a longer piece, but it is the same, it has the same stitching detail, it is the same shape, it's just a little bit longer than the original die. So now that I have my sentiment piece all cut out and ready to go, I'm going to just take a grouping of some pattern papers. These are all from the Simple Stories Claus and Company 6x6 paper pad. I love this paper pad. I may or may not have ordered 5 of them because I love the classic mixed with the really contemporary feel that these Christmas pattern papers have. And it has a great candy cane stripe in there as well. So I've cut those into various banner shapes, mounted them onto a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock that has been cut with the large stitched rectangle die from Lawn Fawn. That's the largest of the large. And then I've gone ahead and mounted my stamped piece onto that vellum piece, and I'm going to mount that entire piece onto my card front using a little bit of foam adhesive, and that's just going to add a little bit more dimension and add a little bit of shadow behind that vellum piece that I've created. And then I'll just finish the card off by adding some sparkling clear sequins, some clear droplets, as well as those star sequins to the front of this card. And then this little bow I cut using the Twine and Bows die set from Pretty Pink Posh. So here's a look back at my completed card projects today, doing a little ombre embossing featuring some products from Altenew and Pretty Pink Posh. Be sure you stop by my blog today to find out the next stop along this hop so that you can get lots of inspiration and ideas, and there will be some prizes up for grab. As always, I will have all the products used in these projects linked in the description at YouTube, as well as over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I hope you've enjoyed this project, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.